Hey there, welcome to the Mental Perk podcast. I'm Carla Hutcherson, licensed professional counselor.
And I'm Brandy Mock, entrepreneur, author, and community leader. And we're here to talk about
real people, real issues, and real talk.
Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to have Brenda Castaneda. Did I say that right?
You did.
She is from Garland, Texas. And she has been a 911 dispatcher, but now she's a supervisor, correct?
Correct.
For 911 in Garland. And we are so excited to have you on the show because, man, I know I've always said that 911 dispatchers they're the front line to our first responders.
That's right.
I mean, you're so many things rolled up in one when you're a 911 dispatcher because you're having to keep people calm. So you're playing counselor. You're having to stay calm. You're having to problem solve. You're having to think quickly. You're having to locate services. You may even have to locate that person. You're doing multitasking on so many different levels. I'm a big fan of the 911 TV show.
She's all about TV shows.
Have you ever watched it?
I've watched it before.
How realistic is it?
That's what I was going to ask you.
Well, I think when I watched it, it's been a few years now, so it was like the first season. So some aspects of it are realistic, and some of the tools that they use, are tools we use. So it does just depend on the center itself and the location. We all have different tools, but some of it is realistic.
And then some of it's not realistic. You're like, that's just TV.
It's probably
Hollywood,
more of like
yeah.
the stories they come up with to go with it. Yeah,
but some of the stories, I hope we never have to deal with that.
That's scary. You say that because I'm curious. There's like all these situations that happen. So I kind of want to walk through, what got you into this field?
Well, I always remember as a little girl, I either said I would be a teacher or I would be in law enforcement. So I did go into some aspects of working in education. And then there was always that, in the back of my mind of what about law enforcement? When are you going to do that? So I actually initially applied to work in the jail, but didn't hear back. I know. But I was a big fan as a kid of America's Most Wanted. So I was like, I want to,
They're going to get Brenda.
catch the bad guys.
Yeah.
So I never got a call back. And I had a family member that worked for the city and said, what about 911? And I thought, I don't have the, qualifications for that, but I didn't really know what was needed. And she said, all you have to have is a high school diploma and they will train you. They've got a great department that will train you. So I applied and sure enough, got in. And in the back of my mind, I always thought, if this doesn't work out, I can always ask, hey, can I go to the jail? Because I still had that,
Yeah.
Or I would go back into education because I did have a job that I loved, absolutely loved where I worked with children before I took on this job. But as soon as I got in there and started training and taking the calls, I knew that's where I was meant to be.
Wow.
So I just never looked back and have been there now over 19 years.
So
you have to be such a quick thinker when you're taking these calls. I mean, tell us a little bit about that process. What does it look like when you're taking a call?
You do have to be a problem solver and a quick thinker. And I kind of attribute some of that with me is I'm the oldest of four. Mm-hmm. So I was always kind of like a third parent. Mm-hmm. And so when my parents weren't there, I had to think. Something went wrong, I had to figure it out. I had to find a solution. So the great thing about our department is we are one of the few departments in DFW that actually have an academy for dispatchers. Kind of like how there's officer academies, we have dispatch academies. So our training department puts everyone through 2 weeks of just listening to 911 calls, and you get a little bit of everything. You'll get things that are big emergencies, things that are not big emergencies, and they walk them through things that we need to ask every caller and how to give them proper customer service, be empathetic, what resources do we have? Because sometimes they need, the police side of it, but sometimes they may need the fire department side of it. And sometimes they call us and don't even need anything of our services, but we have to just redirect them to more of a city service.
Like a non-emergency line.
Yes, like they
something.
need code compliance or something like that.
You're
they
like,
don't know where to call.
You call 911 for code compliance?
Oh, they do. They call. It's such an easy number, and they're like, they know they're going to be helped. So,
right.
Sometimes they call us. So with those 2 weeks of training, it gives you kind of the foundation before you walk into the floor and actually start taking calls. And the way that we do our training is after your 2 weeks, our training supervisor, she has a knack of knowing who to set you up with. So if you've got a certain type of a personality, she has a trainer that's kind of that way, and she'll put you guys together, and they give you about 200 hours of on-the-job training of answering all types of calls, but your trainer's right next to you. So there's no way you can kind of go wrong.
Right.
And they're walking you through until you get to that very last bit of it where now you're ready, now you're on your own, and then you're, finally cut loose.
And then you're cut loose and you're thinking what? I mean, were you super nervous or were you good with it?
I was pretty nervous because whenever I started there, I was 25, and the shift that I was placed on, the majority of people had been there 20 and 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So they knew exactly what they were doing. And so I really wanted to make them proud. So I would, in between calls, kind of study the department's just policies and anything that I was given in my training material just to become better. I remember I would pull up a typing program to type faster.
Wow.
Because I wanted to make sure that everything that I did was, it represented the agency in the best way possible.
Now, it's interesting you say that because I go back and I'm thinking, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking, back in the day, that was a lot of typing. Now with all the AI stuff, are y'all still doing a lot of typing or how does that work now?
We are. What we have over the years obtained, which is great, is now when someone calls 911, if they have a smartphone, which most people do, we pretty much get a very good location of where you're at.
Okay.
So as long as you have a smartphone and you call 911, depending on the city you're in, of course, because not all cities will have the same tools that we have, but we have that. And so it's very helpful. So even if someone calls screaming and they hang up, we kind of know where they are. Where it becomes tricky is, let's say they call from an apartment complex.
You don't know which apartment it is.
That's right.
Okay.
We don't know where to go. So that's where it becomes a little bit trickier. But you still have some older people that still have like the flip phones.
Okay.
And stuff like that.
Or
so
landlines.
And the landlines, luckily, they should be registered to the right location.
Okay.
So that'll pop up immediately. So that's pretty helpful.
But it's those other phones that don't have the special features that make it a little more difficult.
Yes. And sometimes we do have the capability of calling, let's say that phone's registered to AT&T and saying, hey, where's this phone registered to? But sometimes people don't give their correct address or use a fictitious name. And then there's circumstances where they do give that information, but that's not truly where they are. So, just because your phone's registered to your house, you may be having an emergency at Walmart.
Right.
But if you have a flip phone, it's not going to show us you're at Walmart.
It's going to show you where your address is.
Yes. And many people think, oh, well, we can just ping phones. We really can't. It's a long process, and there has to be, lieutenants and other types of approvals that we can't just do. Now, if you call 911 and it pops up, yes. But, someone can't just call and say, my girlfriend didn't make it home. Can you ping her phone? It's
like a Privacy Protection Act.
Yes.
Yeah.
And many people think we can just, we'll just plug it in and just find out where she's at. But it's a lot more steps than that. Now, if you call from your phone, then yes, certainly if you have a smartphone in our particular city, yes, we can see where you're at.
I was reading that there's lots of different challenges and rewards with your job.
Yes.
So I want to go into what are some of the challenges?
I think for most people, the biggest challenges are, for example, two, I think, is most jobs that you take on, you may get a couple days training, a week's training, and then you're on your own. And so now you kind of just learn as you go along, and it's fine. But with our job, in my particular department, we have 4 different areas that you have to train on and successfully pass. So you are training sometimes over a year.
Wow.
So even if you're done on 911 and it took you a couple months, you still have 3 more areas to train. So it's kind of like a stressor for someone where they don't know, yes, I've made it here, but I haven't made it there. And then if I don't make it, what's going to happen? So it's stressful in that part. And then it's also stressful as far as family life. So if you're someone that has to have Thanksgiving with your family every single year, it's going to be hard because it may not be 1 year that you don't get to do it. It could be 3, 4, 5 years, just depending on what shift you're on. Does it fall on your day off? Did you get mandatory to work? With ICE days, a lot of people are like, yay, an ICE day, I get to stay home.
But 911.
Yeah, we have to drive in. It doesn't matter because not everyone lives in the city that we work. So
Right.
Some people live an hour away. Well, they still are expected to show up. I mean, we've had people that live on the other side of, Kaufman County that will just go ahead and just bring, if they know there's some ice coming in, they'll pack for 2 or 3 days and just stay at the station because they can't afford to go home and try to come back. And it's just too much. So that's really hard for people to know, that when the rest of, people that have a 9-to-5 job get to stay home, they don't.
Right.
So
And they are long shifts.
they are.
Yeah.
We work 12-hour shifts.
12-hour shifts. Okay.
So we work 12-hour shifts. I like the way we have it set up because we alternate weekends off. So like my shift, we work Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays. We are off every other Saturday, and then we're off Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Oh, that is a nice.
So that's pretty good, I think. But there's departments where your days off are Tuesday, Wednesday. So when your whole family's off on the weekend, it's really hard.
Right, because you're not with them. There's also, I was reading that there's, stress number one, because you're hearing someone in a crisis and you're having to remain calm.
Yes.
And that's sometimes very difficult because, you don't know if that person's going to be okay. And a lot of times, even after you finish the call, you don't know what the end result was.
Yes.
And
that's very hard. And you just kind of, I kind of take myself out of when the call comes in and the person's very hysterical. I immediately think of, they're needing me to take charge of the situation. So if I get emotional or, become to the point where I can't help them, then now it's worse because situation's bad and now they're not getting help. So I immediately go into how I was trained and to getting all the information and reassuring them that help is on the way, being empathetic to their situation, and then just remaining on the phone with them until someone gets there. When the call's over, many times we don't know unless we ask. So like if we go in and read the report, we'll know what happened, but sometimes there's other pieces of afterwards, like what else happened? We can ask, the officer that responded, hey, did this happen or that? I've had calls that after I hung up, I was really worried, especially with small children, that I just wondered, are they okay? Did another adult come care for them or what happened? And so I've asked, and then there's sometimes that I don't want to know because I'll go home and think about it and just think about it for days. And that, just
Well, see, and that's the one thing I think about because I love watching these 911 shows and listening to these dispatch operators. You've got this super calm voice, just so you know. Like my voice would be like, I'd be freaking out if I was a 911 operator. I get stressed out hearing it. How do you talked about listening to these calls and stuff, but when you've got someone that's calling you and they are screaming at the top of their lung, let's say it's a child, how are you keeping yourself composed to a point to where you're able to get their attention enough to where they're able to tell you the details you need to know to get the first responders there?
I've noticed when they start off like that, they want someone to take charge of the situation. So if you get louder, they're still up there. So I notice whenever I may try to say, hey, can you hear me? But then I lower my voice. They sometimes think you're gone. So then they're like, wait, where'd she go? And then you bring them down. I've had people that start off screaming, upset, cursing, and then by the end of the call, they know help is on the way and they've been helped. So what I like to do with them is, a lot of times, some of the calls that I notice where parents just get really scared is if their child has a seizure for the first time. So there's no history of it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden their child's having a seizure. So they're very, very panicked. So what I try to tell them after I get the address is, I let them know I've already started help for you. Let's help your child. So when they feel like, hey, there's something I can do to help my child, that brings them down because now they know there's some sort of immediate help while help is coming. So I kind of, we are given what we call emergency medical dispatch. So that automatically pops up on our screen. And every question that we ask, as soon as the person answers, we click a button and it gives us the next question. So as soon as I start walking through those, they feel like they're doing something for this patient while the ambulance gets there. And by the end of the call, even though the situation is still, stressful for them, they've calmed down enough to where, they're able to function, they're able to answer, they're able to do. Because sometimes we have to, like, for example, when we give CPR instructions, I'll say, this is helping them until the paramedics get there. Just keep going. I'm going to stay with you, not hanging up. Depending on where I'm sitting in the room, I can see how far the ambulance is. So I'll let them know it's only a few streets away, okay?
Oh, perfect.
You're doing a great job. And with the children, once the parent calms down, I'll say, you're doing a great job. stay this way so that you don't scare the baby. And that just, things like that just usually work. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes if it's really, really bad, we'll get calls where people will just, the situation's so terrible, all they do is give an address and kind of leave, put the phone down and go back to the situation, and just all you hear are screams. So you never can get them there.
I can't imagine just
Yeah,
hearing that
that's
in the
what I was-
background and going,
What's going on?
Yeah.
We don't know. So we just put that in there because a lot of times, I think with 911, the focus we think is on the caller and and their situation, but I also have to think about the officer that's going.
yeah.
What just happened? Did someone come in and, kill multiple people? Is this person out there waiting for the officers to hurt them as well? So we're also worried about scene safety for any units coming in, like the officers, the paramedics, any bystanders wanting to help.
So you could give some sort of warning to them or something.
And
Yeah.
and with calls like that, you don't know.
So have you ever had a mass casualty situation pop up to where I've often wondered, like when you have a mass situation where you're having a lot of officers have to attend the scene, or like let's say a school shooting. I don't know if Garland's had any of that in your 20 years, but I've often wondered, what is the chaos for the operators when you've got 50 calls coming in at one time? How are you able to get through these calls? Are you usually, let's say you get, it's a mass situation and I'm calling you, are you going to stay on the phone with me that entire time? Or are you going to say, we have officers on our way and you're taking the next call to see if you can get additional information from a caller? How does that work?
It, it works like that. So what we try to do, and the one that comes to mind is we had a home explosion a couple years ago, and there were at the very least 5 people inside the home when the home exploded.
Oh, gosh.
And it was, the day was pretty quiet. There wasn't a lot going on. It was a Sunday. And when you can tell when it's something big, because all of a sudden everything lights up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just, something big has just happened, whether it's an accident, and everybody that sees it is calling in. So we started getting calls that the house was on fire. So the call was already put in. So yes, every call that we get, if it's the exact same information, and the person's not there really, they can just see it from a distance. You wouldn't stay on the phone. But if they have any additional information or are with a patient that we can give them instructions for, then we keep those callers on the line.
Right.
So I happened to take one of the calls, but the call that I took, he was with the people that ran out of the house and the people were on fire. So it was pretty traumatic because it was at least, I would think it was an adult, a teenager, and 2 small children that were on fire. So as soon as, they told me that, it really shocked me because I had not taken a call of that magnitude before. And, usually on house fires, there is an ambulance that goes in case someone, is injured. But up until that point, I'd never heard of a call where there were that many people hurt. So immediately I went into the emergency medical dispatch protocol and gave them instructions for them kind of like to stop, drop, and roll so that we could put the fire out. And we had so many officers on scene for that, and they had to call multiple ambulances. That's kind of another...
Oh my gosh, so that literally brought it home to you. Like,
Yes.
I mean, there's a certain type of situation where you can separate yourself from it because you never see the people.
Yes.
There's no personal connection. And then you talk to your mother. How was your mom? Like,
Well, when I told her about it that night, I said, I just had this call, just didn't, I've had many calls, but this one just really shook me. And I just thinking about the family. And she said, I know how you feel. And, it's just, tomorrow will be better. And she was trying to reassure me. And the next morning I get a message from her, and she said, that was my friend. And my mom had known her since they were children. So
oh my goodness.
I had maybe not seen the younger children, but I remembered her.
Right.
So up until that point, our department had always for years been really great about mental health resources.
Yeah.
Just really great. And I'd always kind of like, I don't need that. I'm good. Like, I can separate work from personal feelings or taking it home. And when that situation happened, and I remember that we got an email that was like, really great idea if everybody just does a check-in. And that's when I did a check-in, and it turned it around for me. That I think I started taking better care of myself and doing self-care things because I had kind of just kind of boxed everything up. But, you know, like the lid wouldn't close anymore because there's too many things in there. Like you have to dump it out somehow. And one of the things whenever I did have my chat with someone, they said, you know, what do you do for yourself? That's just for you, that makes Brenda happy. And I couldn't think of anything.
Did you even know? I mean, a lot of people don't even know, right?
Yeah.
No, because I'm like, well, I'm really fulfilled in my job.
Right.
I love it. Like there's
like
not
that's your job. What do you do for you, right?
Yes,
It's like,
that's how they
and
had
you're forced to
explain
think
it.
about it.
I couldn't think of one thing because I said, well, you know, I take my kids. They said, no, that's for your kids. That's for your spouse. You know,
Make you think,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
and I couldn't think of one thing that I did for myself. And that's when I had to go back and think, you know, I love reading. You know, I loved when I was going to school. When I, you know, stopped going to college, I missed it, but I never thought about going back because I was so focused just on this career and I, you know, just other things I love to do. And she said, I'm going to give you the task that you're going to find something and you're going to do that for yourself. And I was already very happy, but I think that has made me just
Happier.
better. Yeah, for sure.
I love that you're bringing up the mental health
Me
resources
too.
because, you know, we know that 911 dispatchers, they share similar things that police officers, firefighters, paramedics do. And that's with PTSD, depression, anxiety. And a lot of times you don't even know these things are happening because you're doing your job and you're going through all the motions and it hits you later. And so the percentages of those certain aspects of mental health are very similar from your job to theirs because you're all in the kind of the same boat as first responders.
You're right. And I didn't realize it until, you know, our behavioral health unit, a lot of times we'll put stuff on the elevator. And after that happened, I remember that they had a paper there that said something about, do you have these feelings like not being able to feel like you can be happy because others aren't? And that's, you know, I felt like I am so blessed. I have so many wonderful things happening in my personal life. And yet this has happened to someone I know. And it was a struggle for a little bit until I talked to someone. And then since then, I've kind of championed it to my staff because after I promoted, you know, we would always get invited to these mental health 1-hour courses like a lunch and learn. And I noticed nobody went. And so I said, you know, we need to start going. If I have to sit in and fill a position for somebody in my staff to go down there and do something for their well-being, you know, I'll do it. So we have people that go now that have
I love
gone.
that.
And they've enjoyed it. And they said, you know, and it'll be different things like how to sleep better or how exercise really, you know, will change your mood or whatever. But it's for your mental health, your physical health. And, you know, now we're starting to take advantage of the opportunities that everybody was kind of like, oh, that's more for officers or that's more for people that are on scene and see it.
Oh my gosh, you're like right there hearing what is one of the hardest things you've had to deal with? I know you talked about the explosion. Is there another one that really just kind of stays with you that really has never left you?
I think another one that happened around that time is I had a child and she was a small child. She was probably like 9 or 10. And she called in because she said her mom wouldn't wake up. And she said, she's been sick for a few days, but I didn't want to call my grandma because, you know, I wasn't sure of the situation. I think the child was trying to take care of mom. And she had I said, is there anybody else there with you? Hoping maybe there was just another adult or child, somebody older. And she said, well, my brothers are here, but they were like 4 and 2. I mean, they were little.
Wow.
And the officers got out there and they ended up taking her to the hospital. So I was thinking, okay, well, you know, everything will be great and these kids will be fine and mom will be okay. And I had created my own happy story for them, but shortly after we received a call that mom had passed. So then you know, as a mom, I'm like, what's going to happen to these kids? And I mean, I had to reach out to the officer and I was like, did someone come get these children? Because I couldn't stop thinking about him. He said, we got older grandparents and, you know, they came and they've got the kids now. So
that's so hard. That's just such a heartbreaking situation. And yet you're trying to be so positive with her and take care of her needs in that moment. That's just, you know, those are tough. I was going to say, when she asked you that question, I said, there has to be one with kids because
that's the one.
That's going to be the toughest heartstring.
And she knew, I mean, the child knew enough that like, I have to call someone. So she knew enough to call 911. And she wasn't totally sure of her address. And it was one of those things, they had a cell phone. So we kind of had an idea. but we didn't know what apartment number. So I had to start like, does your, go outside your door. Is there a number there? Do you see a number? What floor are you on? Are you like on the first floor? Do you have to go upstairs? I mean, I had to really work with her to be able to find them.
Yeah.
But I stayed on the phone until the officers.
Was she calm or was she?
She was pretty calm, and she was trying to, because the other two children were very scared. Like they could tell something was wrong because mom wouldn't wake up. So she said, what do I do? Because they don't stop crying, And I said, well, find them something to do. I said, your brother that's 4, tell him to go to the door so when the officer knocks, he can open it,
Yeah.
And your other, brother, what, is there something he likes? She said, oh, well, yes, whatever in the other room. I said, tell him to go find you that toy, or, keep them busy until they get there. And so, the officer got out there pretty quick and, was able to be there until help arrived.
And I think Brandy was alluding to the fact that, most things that come through 911 are going to be a bad situation. Is there something that you can remember that turned out really well, that was very rewarding for you to be a part of?
Trying to think of all these
we're putting her on the spot right
now. I know we are putting her on the spot.
I'm trying to think of all these different things that have happened. One of the calls that I will say the only reason it was rewarding is because this is before we actually had this tool that we can see where you're at. So it's a sad situation, but the outcome, I guess they said that me staying on the line really helped the call. So what it was is a situation that started in Dallas, and then there was 2 brothers that were being chased by guys shooting at them that came into our city. Well, they called 911. So we get a lot of these open line calls where people will have it in their pocket or something and somehow dial through, and it's never an emergency. So we got one of those calls, and at the time we couldn't really pinpoint exactly where you were, but if you stayed on the line long enough and we didn't hang up, you didn't hang up, we got a pretty close area. So I could hear a conversation in the background, and so I stayed on the line. I was like, what if this is not just one of those pocket dials? So stayed on the line with them, and right before I was thinking about hanging up, it sounded like someone was crying. So I was like, oh, I think this is something. So I went ahead and started the call, and officers started, they headed that way to see what was going on. And just before officers got there, another slew of calls came in where people had witnessed a shooting. So the 2 guys that were involved in this, the 2 brothers, one of them had called 911 because they were being attacked, but they didn't stay on the phone. I don't know if it's because the others showed up, pulled them out of the car. I don't really know. But my call and staying in that call with them, the detectives were able to enhance the call and hear the entire conversation. And with this call, they were able to convict 2 people. It helped.
Very
I mean, there was
nice.
other things, of course, evidence,
Yeah.
witnesses, everything.
Right.
But this call, and you could hear a gunshot.
Oh, wow.
And all these things. And they said, it really helped that I'd stayed on the line and didn't just think, well, this is just a pocket dial, let me hang up. So it helped convict, because they did kill one of the brothers. It helped convict 2 people. I believe both of them got life sentences from this. So, I've had to testify many times.
I was
So-
excited that, I was like,
I didn't even
and
think
then-
about
then
that
there-
part.
I didn't either
Yeah.
until you get that stress too of going, does that stress you out going to have to go to court?
It makes me nervous because it's different every time.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just ask, hey, they play your tape and they say, is this you? Did you take this call?
Yeah.
Thanks, and that's it. And then this one, because it was a murder trial, I mean, they did have many questions, but I had been there long enough that I knew the answers. So it was, I had to be in the courtroom. They played my tape and they enhanced it. And of course, families there, the victim's family.
Oh.
So they're very distraught having to hear it. But for me, I was like, at least I gave back in a way that,
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
it's not a great situation, but this helped.
But you helped.
Well, you
helped the
probably
family
put
get
someone in
some
prison
closure
because you stayed on the phone, even though you weren't sure. There was evidence there that would have never been there had you
would
not
have never.
listened to your gut.
And now that family can heal because the people were caught.
Yeah.
So I think, if I helped in that way, and so that call now is part of our training program
Look at you.
of don't just dismiss, just because it sounds like a regular pocket dial that 99.9 of them are.
Yeah.
Stay on
Or
the
someone
phone.
may like call and then put the phone away so that
Yes.
someone doesn't know that they've called, right?
Yes,
So
it's happened. We've
yeah.
had calls since then like that.
And so that's a good question there. How many pocket dials do you think you get in a day? Or let's say a week. I don't know if it's often enough to where you can count it in a day.
Oh, it's often enough. It's often
I was gonna
enough.
say it happens.
Okay.
Like I was at the gym and like my watch it hit emergency
Yes.
or something. Like when I
Yes.
was doing something and I was like, oh my goodness, because it does
It
dial.
does. It happens a lot with the Apple Watches.
Yeah.
A lot of I get a lot of men that they're like, I had it in my pocket.
Yeah.
And it dialed. We have a lot of people that their kids want to play on their phone, and so after they hit so many buttons, it'll dial 911 because it thinks you're having an emergency.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
Yeah.
and then even disconnected phones. So sometimes people, their phone still works, but maybe they upgraded to a new phone, and they'll give their child the phone to play on it for, like, they'll put the Wi-Fi, home Wi-Fi, let them play the games.
They hit 911.
It'll dial. It'll dial.
That's just so funny. But yeah, so just getting a lot of those during the day
Yes.
and just being able to determine if that's what it is.
Well, and that's just it, though. Like, if you're getting that many a day, like I know sometimes whenever, and you can clarify this tonight because, TV is so different from reality sometimes, right? So someone calls 911 and it's truly an emergency and the person has to hang up. Like I've seen where people will call 911, they're hiding in a closet, someone's broken into their house, and they hang up because sometimes they're scared, they don't want to be discovered on the phone. And I know usually you guys are telling them to stay on the phone, just don't talk, right?
It'll depend. Like if we think it's going to cause some sort of safety issue for them, like let's say they're in the dark, you've got them on the phone, now there's light from their phone. So if it's going to cause some sort of safety issue, then, put the phone down, put it under whatever, I won't say anything, but just, it just depends on the situation each time, really.
But when it happens, though, and you've got a situation like that, you're not able to hear, but you hear something run, like, fumbling around, do you usually send an officer out there to make sure nothing's...
If we can't determine that there's no emergency, we do.
Okay.
We do send someone out there.
Okay.
To make sure.
So I was reading also that burnout is pretty high. You've been in your job for 20 years, so you're of the 70%, but there's like a 30% burnout rate for 911
Well, it
dispatchers.
sounds like when you were training, a lot of those people had been there for years. It sounds like there's not a big turnover, though.
Yeah.
Is there on this?
Most agencies do have trouble keeping staffed because, again, it's also like scheduling. So we work 12-hour shifts. So the majority of people we get, they're like, none of them have worked 12 hours. They're mostly 8-hour shifts, Monday through Friday. Many people are not used to working overnights because we have to have someone to work overnight. Many people are not used to having work weekends, holidays. So they do get burned out. And the thing about us is, for example, in other jobs, if someone that files something or does data entry doesn't show up, well, they can just do it the next day.
Right.
But with us, we have to have a minimum staffing in order to, properly serve the citizens. So if you don't come in today, she's on call, so she's going to have to come in for you. So if that's
and
her,
you can get some angry 911 dispatchers,
Yeah.
right?
so if she's already worked 4 12-hour days in a row, and now she has to come in a 5th day, sometimes for some people that's too much.
Yeah.
If they're not used to working.
How many 911 dispatchers do you have in your department?
We have, I think, approximately, the last time we counted, I think we have like 40 in our department.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But that is counting supervisors as well.
Okay.
So about 40. But just depends. Like I was told that Dallas has 30 to 50 on a shift. I have no idea how many they have in their department, but
oh, wow.
they keep.
But Garland's pretty big.
We're growing.
Yeah.
Yes,
Pretty
big
big.
city.
What are relationships like with other first responders? What does that look like for the 911 dispatchers and the other first responders?
I think that the majority of my closest friends are my coworkers.
Okay.
Because there's some that I started with that I'm very close with, and then there's some that started after me that I've trained or mentored, and I'm close with them, and then some that came before me that I kind of just looked up to them, and now I'm close with. So, and I noticed that like people that kind of start around the same time, they usually become good friends. So the way that we have is we have these academies. So, for example, everyone that's in that particular academy, which is anywhere from 3 to 6 people, you'll notice that they train, like they'll start on 911, and then from there they'll train on the next position, or they'll go to certain training courses. So they kind of become a tight-knit group, or they'll become close with their trainers or close with their supervisors. So
Do you get close with the officers that you're, I mean, do you tend to see the same officers, or is it always different?
So our shifts are pretty similar. I think they're one day off. Like our rotating day off is a Saturday, but I think theirs is like a Wednesday or a Thursday. But usually we work the same days they do. So you see the same names over and over, and that kind of forms a relationship there, because you can reach out to them for stuff, or they'll ask you things. So
yeah, that's nice. That's nice to kind of have that
She knows
community.
some of our Garland PD.
Oh, she does.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, good. Yeah, we love working with our police officers, and so the job itself, it seems like it's very rewarding in a lot of ways, even though it's very stressful. Do you feel like that? I mean, every day you make a difference. Do you feel like
I do?
Yeah,
I really do, and I can't think of anywhere I would be happier. Like, I can't think of another job that I would like, oh, I would really love to do that. And I'm always promoting this job, because I think yes, there's highs and lows, and it's a roller coaster, especially in the beginning, because you're learning. But once you get that under your belt, that even on the bad days, this is a good place to work, because you've made a difference for somebody.
absolutely.
And even like sometimes their situation doesn't turn out as we would want it to, but at least you're there, with them until someone can take care of whatever's going on for them.
Well, I'm hoping this podcast helps people to really appreciate your role, because, our communities would not be okay without 911 dispatchers.
No,
I mean, the role you play is so important. You're saving people's lives, and it just, you're the very first contact that person has.
That's what I tell them, that, we think of our first responders as being, the firemen, the police officers. She's the front end of this. She's the one making sure these officers, these EMTs, they know what they're getting themselves into prior to getting there, like especially if you've got an active shooter situation, or you've got, domestic. You deal with a lot of domestic situations.
We do. And now that she mentioned that, I just thought of two good calls that I would tell you about where there was a happy ending.
Okay, tell us. We like happy endings.
I received a call from two that I can think of. One from a lady that called and said, she thought her husband was dead. So I don't know, if he'd had a heart attack or what the situation was. And she said, she's pretty distraught and was just waiting on the paramedics to come. And I said, well, where is he? She said, well, he's on the second floor. And I said, well, where are you? She said, well, I'm by the front door. I'm ready to open the door. She just wanted somebody to take care of this. And I said, well, that's fine. Unlock the door, but I want you to go upstairs because we're going to do CPR. And she said, well, I don't know how. And, I think he's dead. And I get her to go back up there, and he made it. He survived.
And you trained her how to do CPR
at that moment. And so that I have that one. And then I have another one where they had called and said that the wife had gone into labor. So usually when we get those types of calls, they're having contractions or maybe their water broke, but our fire department's pretty quick. So by the time they get there, sometimes they don't even have the baby until they make it to the hospital. So when this person calls, they said, well, the baby's already partially out. And so he said, but it's got its umbilical cord stuck around the neck. So already had multiple issues going on. So, we had to pull out. At the time, we didn't have, now it's on the computer where whatever you click on will send you to the next thing. But at the time we had that program, we had a card set, which we still have the card sets in case, let's say the
computers go down. Like what happens when they go down, right?
So, there I was flipping with the card set because you have to go back and forth on, well, now the baby's born, but it's got the cord. And so we were able to get the cord, removed.
Wow.
And so, yes, baby's doing well.
That's so rewarding.
You said at the beginning you had this dilemma: do I be a teacher or do I be a law enforcement? You're doing both. You're teaching people,
and that's what I've enjoyed since I promoted, because a lot of times, I remember when I was going to school for teaching, they said a lot of times people will send material out, and you're thinking of, well, this is how I learn, or they should all learn that way. But no, you need to send it in multiple ways. So, when I promoted, I said, I'm not just going to send an email. I'm also going to do, maybe I'm going to go one-on-one and ask, hey, show me how you're doing this, and show them the way. Or maybe I'm going to do a PowerPoint. And so, that's kind of the way that I still get to, I guess, fulfill that other role that I had before. before.
Well,
But also just teaching CPR. You're teaching this person how to do CPR.
Well, she's teaching our listeners right now what to expect when you when you call into 911. You know, I know a lot of people too, though. Brenda talked to us about this. They hesitate to call 911 because they're, 911 is like, to me, I mean, I need to know I've got to call 911. Mm-hmm. What do you tell people when they're not sure if they should call 911 or not?
I've had, and a lot of times it's older people. Sometimes they call our non-emergency number and they'll say things like, well, I'm having chest pains. And so I'm like, hey, next time this happens, call 911. Doesn't matter what time of day or night. So, or I'll have people that'll say, my neighbors, I found out my neighbor's house was broken into, and I did see someone earlier in the day, but I thought maybe they were just, walking the neighborhood or something. So I always tell them, if you think something's out of place and something may be wrong, don't ever hesitate, because you can prevent someone's home from being broken into, or their car broken into, or something bad happening. So, and I tell them too, because they'll say, oh, well, my other neighbor said this, and I'll say, well, let your neighbors know too. Mm-hmm. They see anything out of place, call 911.
It's better to call and be wrong than to not call and something happen.
Yes.
So it's like, if you're out there and you're scared to think that, something could happen if I call 911 and there's not a problem. I think there is people who call with fake situations, they can get in trouble. But if you're really genuinely calling because you think something could happen, then that's not going to be that situation where you're going to get in trouble.
And a lot of times they'll apologize. They'll say, this is not an emergency. And I'll say, are you in Garland? They'll say, yes. I says, well, go ahead and tell me. And they'll say, oh, well, there's this guy that's, trying door handles. And I'll say, well, we need to get somebody
suspicious.
out there.
Yeah.
We need to get somebody out there.
Yeah.
So, get their description
definitely.
and everything. And so, sometimes they'll be very apologetic because they don't want to bother anybody.
Right.
So,
do you ever get a situation, and I know we always try to bring light into bad, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever get a situation where you got a 911 call and you had to laugh because it was so
outrageous?
Yes, we've had.
Do tell.
I'm trying to think.
She's so sweet, y'all. When she laughs, it's even sweet. It's a nice little laugh.
I'm trying to think of what's funny, because we've had things that we've even, over the years, that I'm like, this can't be true, or surely this isn't.
Y'all need to have a library of stories, the famous stories.
Or the wall of shame or something.
The wall of shame.
And,
I stuck my head through this bar and whatever.
Yeah, we've had things like that, like with kids.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I saw one the other day on TikTok where there was a child that put his head through, like, the chairs at school that had like a little hole.
Yeah.
And they were like, and I was thinking, how are they going to get him out? They're going to have to call. We've had
the jaws of life.
We've had to get the fire department out there. We've had the handcuff calls, like, oh, they're playing with handcuffs and now they can't, And so we're having to, like, okay, the fire department's like, well, we can't. Does an officer have keys? But they don't have keys to those with their kids handcuffed. So we've had a lot of calls that, and I can't think of anything right off the top of.
People in compromising situations.
Yes. And we've had to, and a lot of times, we've had medical calls where people will say, they didn't expect for a certain medical issue to happen. And they'll say, well, hold on, I've got to, put on my shirt before the paramedics call in, or my pants, because there could be in the middle of the night. And then someone says, I'm having a heart attack, and they're not fully dressed. And they're so worried about
what they look like.
Yes. Yeah. I got to pull my hair up. And I'm like, it's okay.
That would be you, Carla.
That would be me. So put on some lipstick.
It would be you.
I heard a call years ago, and I was pretty new at the time, where I believe it was someone that had been shot, and they either were about to get in the shower or were getting out of the shower. And I remember that the call taker was saying, just the officers were on scene, and they were like, have him come out. Is he able to get out? And she was saying, well, he don't want to come out because, he was either about to get in the shower or get out. So he didn't have all his clothes on anymore. And so he didn't want to come out like that. And she kept saying that the officers don't care if you don't.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, now you've got all your neighbors probably wondering why there's all these squad cars.
Yeah.
Right. And here you are having to walk out. So there's,
But he had been shot.
Oh, yes.
He was shot and in the shower, and he was worried about what he looked like.
He was worried because he didn't,
Wow.
And so
I don't even think about that. Like, I would not be worried about, I'd be like, whatever you got to see, you can see it. I got a 911, right?
Yeah.
And I specifically remember I was brand new, and it was on Valentine's Day. So, of course, after that, we were like, well, there was a lady that worked there at the time that said, well, I'm glad I don't have a Valentine, you know.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting here thinking, I mean, the people that don't were like, I didn't get any flowers today, or I didn't. And then we had this. We're like, well.
I didn't get shot, though. I didn't get flowers, but I did not get shot.
It leads me to a question. Are there certain nights of the year
that
have the strangest, busiest call, like even just the strangest calls, like Halloween or full moon?
Full moons. That's what I was thinking, full moons.
People will say that sometimes when we come in, because I don't work nights anymore, but when I come in, and if there's a whole lot of calls, and people say, well, you know, last night we had a full moon. So that's probably why that happened. But for sure, when we're busiest is going to be coming up New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve,
because that'll a lot of people.
4th of July.
Yeah.
I mean, the phones will just light up the minute it's midnight.
Yeah.
I've always heard nothing good happens after midnight. Is there a certain, this is a good question too, is there a certain time of day that you'll get more calls than others?
We are busier during the day, but it's going to be not as high priority.
Yeah.
You know, so during the day while people are gone, you know, their homes are broken into, or maybe they have an accident on the way to work, stuff like that. But overnight is when you get all your big stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like someone may be robbed and may be shot or whatever the case. Because when we come in the morning, we're like, oh my goodness, they had this, this, and this, and they're all high priority calls. But during the day, we have so many calls. It's a bigger amount of calls, but not as high priority for the most part.
Okay, so I have a good question for you. Being this 911 supervisor that you are, by the way, you've gotten tons of rewards, awards, accolades that you've been awarded with for all the work you've put into for the 20 years. Mm-hmm. But how do you keep from being a helicopter mom and a helicopter wife after seeing and hearing all these? Does that affect you at all, or do you feel like it affects you as a mom or a wife?
Well, when you mentioned the, overnight stuff, nothing good happens.
Yeah.
I think about that. Like, we don't go out at night, but, sometimes when we've been out and we're leaving and, we're trying to make it home, I try to make it home before 2 a.m. because I'm like all the clubs and the bars and all that. And that's when people start drinking and driving.
Yes.
And we lost one of our dispatchers years ago. She was coming into work and drunk driver killed her coming into work. So I'm always that when I think of, just situations, I don't want to be out late at night. I really don't. And with my kids, yes, I am kind of like, because I've read and seen and heard things. So, I'm more okay with the friends coming over than them going to friends' homes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just always being there. I don't care if I'm tired. I don't care if I'm sleepy. I'd rather go to the event and just make sure I'm keeping an eye on them, but also other children.
Yes.
Yes.
Because
100%.
Other parents are kind of like, oh, they'll be okay, or the mom seems nice, but you just don't know what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah. Well, especially with all the calls you get. I mean, you probably hear a lot of things. But
well, I'm hoping this episode will really help people appreciate the job that you do and really understand your role as a first responder and just, the challenges that go along with that. And we just really want to highlight that, the commitment that you and your field put into safety and caring for others. And that's just such an important cause. So we really appreciate you being here. We always want to leave with a this or that. So my this or that is to you is pause time or rewind time?
I want to pause time.
You want to take it slower?
Yes.
Yes. I don't want to go backwards. I think I agree with you. I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause.
Because you can't, going back's not going to help you.
No. I
guess it'll help you not do the same thing again, but.
Yeah. I think people think I want to go back and be young again, but no, I like the pause time and just really taking it all in. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Really, though, if you ever hear or see someone that's a 911 dispatcher or supervisor, make sure you thank them.
Yeah, appreciate
because we like to thank I know this sounds like a really probably stupid question, but I guess every department's different. Do you wear uniforms?
We do.
Okay.
We wear a black polo shirt that, you know, says communications, Garland Police Communications. And then as far as we could wear jeans, we could wear khakis, but that's our uniform.
Well, just make sure you thank these guys.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Brenda, for being on our show.
Enjoyed it.
No, seriously, like you're the front line. I think it's so important. So we're so thankful for you being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If you or anyone you know is struggling with mental health issues, please reach out to talk to someone you trust. Get connected to a mental health professional who can help you find ways to cope and ultimately feel better. If you are having suicidal or self-harm thoughts or thoughts of hurting another person, please go to the nearest ER, call 911, or contact the National Suicide Hotline at 988. Thank you for tuning in to Mental Perk. We hope our talk today highlighted real people working through real issues based on mental health. Our goal at Mental Perk is to make sure every one of you knows you're worthy. We're in this together.